Hi, this is Jeff Walter, host of the Training Pet Podcast and founder and CEO of LatitudeLearning. Recently I was over at the IFA World Franchise Show down in Miami, and it was a really great show. Learned a lot of things. It's really interesting what's going on in that space. But there was a recurring theme, and I was speaking down there, and I talked to a number of folks afterwards and during the show, and there was a common problem that kept recurring. There were a lot of franchises there. There were emerging franchises. Those are folks with 10 to 50 franchisors. And there was an emerging problem I saw. And even as when I talked to some of the larger franchisors, and that was scaling their franchise training program. And typically for the fledgling franchisors or the emerging franchisors, or even the larger franchisors, they do a really great job at onboarding that initial franchisee. In doing so, but it tends to be very manually intensive. So that typical new franchisee onboarding training usually consists of a kind of an instructor-led training program that really focuses on skill development. So often the new franchisee would be invited to come to headquarters for 1 to 3 weeks. They would go to the test kitchen or test facility at headquarters. They'd be briefed on and trained on a whole bunch of things. Obviously, the franchise, also things like P&L management, financial management, things you need to know from a business owner standpoint on how to run a franchise. But then also the technical things associated with the franchise, with it was a quick service restaurant, how to prepare the food, service the customer, etc. Or if it was something like the automotive repair or something that had more technician related or cleaning service or any of the myriad of things. The new franchisee would then be taught all the different skills that it took at that headquarters over that couple of week period. And then after that, the typical thing would be for them to go on to go to an actual site, an actual franchise location or corporate store, and be there for another 2 weeks or so as a employee of the franchise, and then they can see firsthand how to interact with customers, how to actually do the work, whether it's food preparation or installation, and they would see firsthand what it's like inside of one of the franchises. And that's fairly, 2 to 4 week intense period of teaching a new franchisee and bringing them on board and making sure they have the skills to be able to run a franchise and do it. And then that onboarding program would extend to when the new franchisee is getting ready to open their location and sending an instructor out to that location so that they could train all the initial employees and make sure that it's going to be a successful launch. And sometimes even stick around for a week or two working in the location to make sure it's a successful launch. And so it's a pretty, and that's your typical new franchisee onboarding training. It's pretty instructor-led, intensive, focusing on not only knowledge acquisition, but skill development, and pretty good. And then when it comes to the typical new franchise employee training after that initial thing, again, the typical thing was they're expecting the new franchisee to kind of train the trainer, and it's kind of a train-the-trainer model, and they're expecting the new franchisee to go train everybody. And there's not really a lot of support for the employees you bring on 6 months, a year later. And so that's kind of the typical program that you see. And so when you're an emerging franchisor with 10 to 50 units out there, typically there's a person, a lot of times it's the founder or somebody close to the founder, one of the executives, and they're going around to all these different franchisees, all these different locations, and bring the people into headquarters for a few weeks and doing that initial thing, and then they're running out to location A to train their initial people, and over to location B. And you can see that from a scalability standpoint, as you're adding more and more locations, that model of a heavy instructor-led really starts to put its toll on the organization. People just get stretched thin. They're going all over the country or continent or all over the world. We have one client where they're literally flying all over the world, their instructors, and it's very taxing. It's hard to scale. And then on top of that, you're not getting a lot of support 6-12 months down the line out of training support when you bring on that next wave of franchise employees. They're expecting the franchisee to do the training, and that becomes problematic, and that leads to even more. Hey, you just send somebody here to help. I just hired 5 more people, and I need more help. So that's kind of the situation that I found down there, talking to a lot of these franchisors. And so the question became, hey, Jeff, as an emerging franchisor, how can I scale my franchise training program so that I don't have people running around like chickens with their head cut off? And so we started talking about that, and I started thinking about that. And in my presentation down there, I kind of included how to scale your franchise employee training program. So that first part about onboarding a new franchisee, very solid, but very instructor-led, very intense. My suggestion on that component and on the other component is you need to start to move towards a blended learning program. And away from a purely on-site instructor-led training. And that's how you can start to scale your franchise training program. So let's look at it from 2 components. First, from that onboarding of the new, and then from the ongoing. On the onboarding of the new, instructor time time in front of that expert is very valuable time. It's expensive time, but it's also extremely valuable. Blended learning is where you combine self-paced learning, a self-paced training course, whether it's a video course or a SCORM e-learning course or some other self-paced type of learning course. You combine that with instructor-led training. And the best way to do that is to use self-paced learning and assessments of the knowledge you're assuming somebody to get in that self-paced learning to establish a baseline of knowledge. And so even on the new franchisee training program, rather than bringing them into headquarters and starting from scratch and spending all that valuable instructor-led time just learning the basics, you start to bring in a blended learning program where you're getting the basics out of the way. You're kind of expressing this is what the franchise is, this is what it's about, this is our brand, this is what we're doing, this is how this is how you do this service, this is how you do that service, this is how you do the financial statement, this is what you should be doing every month from an ordering standpoint, et cetera, et cetera. And you can build a lot of that into self-paced learning so that the new franchisee gets a certain base level of knowledge before they come to headquarters for that intense 2-week instructor-led course. And what we found is when you do that, the time spent with the instructor becomes much, much richer and more valuable to the learner because they've already got a certain base level of knowledge. And in acquiring that knowledge, they've also developed a number of questions and things that they have thought about. And so when they actually get into that time with the instructor, that 2-week, in this case, the 2-week time, it's just a much richer, they're operating at a much higher level and they can get more out of that very valuable face-to-face instructor time. And then same thing when they're out at the company store or the training store. It kind of jumpstarts everything. They start, the instructor's not sitting there starting from, step 1 or up at step 10 and go from there. So, that's blended learning. In order to do blended learning, you also need a learning management system. You can do it with just videos that they watch on YouTube or something, or some private video channel, like a Vimeo or something. But to do it properly, you really want to get a learning management system there and put the self-paced courses on top of that. That works out well. So, and a nice thing about that and investing in that allows you to start to scale that new franchise training program, is it also helps out on the ongoing franchise employee training. And again, the typical model is that train the trainer and the new franchisees, call up and say, hey, can you send somebody out? That person's running around the country trying to train. When you invest in that blended learning, now that same material on how to do all the jobs within the franchise and the franchise positioning and meaning and culture and what you're trying to accomplish there, all of those materials can also be used for new franchise employee training, so that when they start hiring the next franchise employee 3 to 6 months down the road, rather than saying, hey, Ms. Franchisee, you go train them and here's the materials, you can actually say, hey, have them take these 10 courses. It teaches them how to, from customer service, teaches about the brand, the story of the brand, how to do the elements of the how to merchandise, if it's a retail store, how to do installation, if it's more of a technical thing, how to provide the service, if it's a service-oriented franchise. It gives you the baseline for all the franchise employees so that they can acquire that same base level of knowledge and understanding. And again, you want to do that with a series of assessments to assess their knowledge. And I would suggest assessing their knowledge first. If they already know something, if they already know the basic tenets of customer service, or if they already know how to do a particular operation, they can test out of it, and that condenses the amount of time that they have to spend in training. But regardless, you want to get all that self-paced stuff available for that ongoing franchise training, franchise employee training. And then taking the next step, start combining it, start creating certifications so that the franchise employee becomes a certified installer or certified barista or certified store manager or a certified sales associate, and use that certification and some type of reward or incentive. And the reward can be as simple as a diploma to much more sophisticated monetary rewards or points so they can buy things in a company store, or they earn a plaque. There's all different types of reward mechanisms, but even just starting with a simple diploma that they're a certified sales associate or store manager or technician is a start and certifications allow you to get that. Then you start looking at measuring your program based on the number of certified franchise employees you're creating. And that gives you the base, that blended learning where there's a lot of self-paced learning going on at the employee level. You've got kind of a 50-50 mix of self-paced and instructor-led at the onboarding level. That really starts to give you the tools to scale, to have a scalable franchise training program. And as you continue to evolve past 10 to 50 units, and you're going from being an emerging franchisor to you're on your way to an established franchisor, now you can start to move into more advanced things like certifying a franchise location, and say, well, a certified franchise location is one that has so many certified sales associates, certified managers. In order to become a certified manager, a certain percentage of people have to be certified, et cetera, et cetera. And now you're looking at having a certified franchise location, and you're taking it up a notch. And as you're doing that, you might want to start to look at incentives at the franchise level. And we've seen different forms of that incentivization from, reducing the cost of the training to the franchisee to, adding a little financial sweetener in terms of products and rebates and things like that. But all these are ways to work with your franchisees so that it hit a certain level of knowledge and skills within their franchise locations, because ultimately a trained franchise is a more profitable franchise for both you and the franchisee. And then as you're rolling that out, getting into that, you also want to start to roll out some manager feedback. You want to, one of the easiest things is the Net Promoter Score. Staff managers, franchisees, would you recommend this training program, these certifications to another franchisee? And now you start to measure your success of your training program based on the number of certified franchises, or certified franchise locations. Excuse me. And that kind of takes you up to that 100-unit, as you're growing and scaling. And it's giving you the tools to make sure that not only are your franchisees trained, but their employees are trained and knowledgeable. And I was talking to one franchisor, small franchisor, and they were really pushing on the train-the-trainer model until I said, well, the other thing you got to remember is that frontline employee, that does is the representation of your brand. They represent your brand to the end customer. And by doing the train-the-trainer model, you're relying on your franchisee to convey the value of your brand to the frontline employee. By providing this blended training, this self-paced learning, you're able to control the message that's going right out to that frontline employee that is the one that's interacting with the customer. And so when you start, so not only are you getting them up to speed, but you're also getting more consistent messaging getting out to those frontline franchise employees that are the face of the brand to your ultimate customers. So that was, once I kind of put it that way, they're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And so as you're going through this and you're evolving your onboarding program to a blended learning, and then you start creating a blended learning program or a self-paced program for the franchise employees, you're creating the tools to not only get that initial success when a new franchise launches, but then that ongoing success as you bring new people in. Interesting thing, I was talking to somebody else down at the show, and they had referenced a recent survey of retail employees, especially focused on franchise retail employees. And the number one, not the number one of the top reasons why a new franchise employee quit within the first 30 days was they were not trained. And so they didn't know what they were doing. And then one of the top reasons why a new employee quit within the first year was they realized nobody else knows what they're doing because they're not trained either. So the training is an important part. People knowing what they're supposed to be doing is an important part to having a successful franchise network. And this is a way of scaling your franchise training program. Then once you get kind of past, that kind of takes you up past 100 units. You've got this nice blended learning program going. You're certifying the employees. You're certifying the franchise locations. You got some type of incentive going on so that the franchises are making sure that people get trained and certified and maintaining that level of knowledge and skill within their franchise. Now you want to start to move to the next level, which is really skill development, looking at skill profiles. What are the different skills and different roles within the franchises? What are the different skill levels? You want to be able to get into skill assessments, and with skill assessments, that also requires regular practice and mentoring and coaching, and they're, starting to bring tools into that, and doing that, and one of the cool things happening right now with AI is traditionally, though, that practice and that coaching was something that was very human intensive and therefore very expensive, and especially very expensive to do at the franchise employee level. Now with AI and avatars and virtual reality, a lot of that can be done through a computer and therefore at a very, very low cost, and that allows you to extend that out to the frontline employee so they can practice a skill, such as, say, dealing with a difficult customer, right? Or practicing their sales skills, if it's more like, say, dealership, or in the virtual reality world, practice a technical skill. And so, and this is as you're growing past 100 units, you can start to look at that, start to create those environments where people can practice their skills, have their skills assessed, and then you start measuring your success based on the skill levels within the franchises. And so there you kind of have a multi-step approach. You get your friend, to scale your franchise training program to go from what many fledgling franchisors have, which is a really instructor-intensive onboarding program, and then provide some materials for ongoing training, employee training, to one where that intense onboarding program turns into a blended program. The franchisee gets more out of it because they're spending that time at a higher level. They've gotten all the basics out of the way, and so they can really use that time much more effectively. But then also it really lays the groundwork for all the self-paced learning materials that the franchise employee needs. And if you do that, and we've seen that work, and that's my suggestion to emerging franchisors. This is how you scale it. Start with the instructor intensive stuff. Start developing a blended learning program for your onboarding, and use those same materials to train franchise employees. and then start to migrate, and create the certifications and the rewards for certifications, and then start to certify the franchise locations. So you make sure they have a certain level of knowledge within a franchise, and then, add some incentives on that for the franchisees. And then eventually, as you ramp up past 100 units, start thinking about skill profiles and giving franchise employees the opportunity to practice those skills and get coaching. And with AI emerging, that's emerging as a very cost-effective technology to allow people to practice those skills and get coaching from the AI. There's some really fascinating things going on there, which I'll talk about in another episode. And if you're able to do all that, well, then you can accrue the benefits of franchise training. The number one benefit being increasing revenue and profitability. So that's really a double whammy to the bottom line, double thumbs up, good. And that happens because you get more consistency across your franchise locations. Again, because you're training that frontline employee that's the face of the franchise to the customer. That consistency leads to a better customer experience, higher customer satisfaction and loyalty. It also increases improved operational efficiency, which is part of the profitability. And then all, at the end of the day, improved franchise employee retention. As I mentioned earlier, lack of training, lack of knowledge, one of the key reasons people leave within the first 30 days and then again within the first year. And so, you get better consistency, higher customer satisfaction, increased efficiency, and improved employee retention. That all contributes to that higher revenue, higher profitability, and that's what you're aiming for with your franchise training program. So, like I said, it was a great show. I really enjoyed it. The folks over at IFA did a really nice job putting on. There were some great attendees asking lots of really deep probing questions about all this. There are some really good seminars from other speakers, about what to look for in a franchise. And interesting enough, one of them was your franchisor needs to do 3 things for you: so help you in sales, help you train you, and then provide ongoing support. So it's very good to see training as number 2 in there. But it was a really great show. I had a really great time. This need came out of it. Stay tuned to our website because we think there's something we can do there to create a program to help these emerging franchisors ramp up. But till then, just want to share that information, had that conversation with a number of people down there, and thought that it would make for a good episode to get out to a wider audience in terms of how to scale your franchise or training or your franchise training program. Thank you for listening. Appreciate you as always, and have a wonderful day.